The highest honor which we can show to the memory of him who has passed from the visible world to the world invisible, and to you whose longing eyes are straining into the impenetrable darkness to follow him, is to contemplate his life as an inspiration, and to respond to his example by an answering devotion to human liberty and to human equality. Mae Sewell, President of the National Council of the Women of the United States. I am Michael St. Andrews, an actor and activist, and I invite you to take this journey to tell the backstory of the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, then and now.
Frederick Douglass has been often spoken of as the foremost man of the African race in America. Though born and reared in slavery, he managed through his own perseverance and energy, and with the help and agency of his first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, and the assistance of his second wife, Helen Pitts Douglass, to win for himself a place that not only made him beloved by all members of his own race in America, but also won for himself the esteem and reverence of all fair-minded persons, both in this country and in Europe. Mr. Douglass had been for many years a prominent figure in public life. He was of inestimable service to the members of his own race and rendered distinguished service to his country from time to time in various important offices that he held under the government. He became well known early in his career as an orator upon subjects relating to slavery. He won renown by his oratorical powers both in the United States and in England. He had become known before the Civil War also as a journalist. So highly were his opinions valued that he was often consulted by President Lincoln after the Civil War began. Mr. Douglass, perhaps more than any other man of his race, was instrumental in advancing the work of banishing the color line. The life of Frederick Douglass inspired this project. However, this project concentrates on the organization, individuals inspired by Frederick Douglass to mount campaigns, design organizations, expend human capital, give finances, all to preserve his legacy. Who are these people? What organizations? The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs was founded in 1896 by a group of women who were determined to organize and fight against the reputation or the disparagement of their reputation by James Jacks. This man was out of Missouri, an obscure person. However, he did send a letter around the country challenging the respectability of African American women. And in any case, these women decided that they were going to make sure that they were respected, that they were understood as entrepreneurs, family, women, educators, and the like. Now, there were several organizations that formed in various parts of the country, and they quickly saw that their interests and mission were the same, and so they came together to form eventually this organization. The founders included Harriet Tubman, Margaret Murray Washington, Frances E.W. Harper, Ida B. Wells Barnett, and Mary Church Terrell. Its two leaders, though, were Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin and Mary Church Terrell. They were in various parts of the country, and I found it amazing in that period of time how they were able to communicate so cogently and move from place to place for their meetings, whether it was Boston or Washington, D.C. And as a matter of fact, Harriet Tubman was the first guest speaker at the inaugural event that celebrated the founding of this organization. During the next years after the founding of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, the women involved became very active in campaigns in favor of women's suffrage and against lynching and Jim Crow laws. They also led efforts to improve education and care for both children and the elderly. By 1918, when the United States entered the First World War, membership in the NACWC had grown to an extraordinary 300,000 nationwide. For 10 years after the founding of NACWC, as I said, the women became involved in campaigns in favor of women's suffrage and against lynching and Jim Crow laws. They were quite activist in the community at large. They also led efforts to improve education and care for both children and for the elderly. They marched, they gave lectures. After they felt that they had clarified who they were as businesswomen, as family leaders, as community leaders, one of the leaders of the organization, Mary Burnett Talbot, invited and encouraged the organization to take on the restoration of the Frederick Douglass home, Cedar Hill. Mary Burnett Talbot was an educator, orator, activist, suffragist, and reformer. She's been called the best-known African-American woman in the United States as it relates to preservation. She was among the most prominent African-American women of her time. She was the president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, and at one of their biennial meetings, she called the organization together to see if they would take on the challenge of restoring or assisting in the restoration of the Frederick Douglass home. She said that she wanted her group of women to be like the Sojourner Truths, Harriet Tubmans, Amanda Smith, Frances Ellen Watkins Hopper, and others who passed through what she called the fire of slavery and its galling remembrances. The NACWC, at one of its biennial meetings, created a committee to consider the possibility of assisting trustees of the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, FDMHA, with the care of the house and legacy Douglass left behind. She said, quote, "After careful consideration of all the facts, we conclude that this is the psychological moment for us as women to show our true worth and prove that the Negro women of today measures up to those strong and sainted women of our race like Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Amanda Smith, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and others who passed through the fire of slavery and its galling remembrances. We believe the attainment of the goal depends upon the enlistment of every Negro man, woman, boy, and girl in America. We seriously realize that it will require us to mobilize all the resources of our association to show that we are not afraid to put ourselves on record as being able to save the home by one day's cooperative effort."
Frederick Douglass Home Historic Site is the first historic site to a black person in the Park Service's inventory. You know, now they have several of them.
Yeah.
But the Frederick Douglass Home was the first.
First one, okay.
And John F. Kennedy was the one that signed the deed. They have a picture there. I don't have the picture, but there was a picture of him at the table at home signing the signing the deed, accepting it.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And while we are at that point, why exactly was the home turned over to the National Park Service?
Well, one reason, but I would say the main reason why it was turned over, because over the years, it gotten to be an awesome financial strain to keep it maintained the way it should be maintained. You know, with the various items inside. You know, you had to make sure if we wanted it to be in perpetuity. You know, the home didn't have any. There was no income. The association didn't have any income to speak of to maintain it, and the income they did get wasn't sufficient to maintain the home. The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, which is where a lot of the association members came from, that wasn't enough to sustain.
I'm a park ranger with the National Park Service, worked there for 3 years. I've looked at a lot of primary source material while I've been stationed at the site, and this house just has such a vast and amazing history. The preservation story, I think, is something that also kind of gets lost in all of that. If it were not for the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association caring for this place for 60 plus years, we might not have a site to come to and recognize Frederick Douglass and get to see the collection inside. So the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association did a tremendous job in getting the site started. You can see right away, Helen Pitts Douglass dies in 1903. I found evidence in 1904 that FDMHA was already leading tours through the house. They say they have somebody stationed here showing Frederick Douglass's personal effects, leading people around the grounds. So like the FDMHA was on top of it right away, giving tours. Now, as you know, they partnered with the National Association of Colored Women, 1916, and within 2 years, the NACW has helped to pay off the mortgage on the house. And by the 19-teens and 20s, they're looking at doing a restoration. They say the house needs some help here. So what should we do? They evaluated it all, did a first major restoration in the 1920s, and celebrated it in 1922.
Okay, well, the Housing Corporation was started in 1975, I believe. Mm-hmm. Frankly, this was the most exciting project I had to work with. I basically did all the work, you know, all the legwork type stuff.
Of formulating the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation.
Right.
Okay, so what's the relationship with the Housing Corporation and
the association?
Right.
Okay, well, when the association pursued getting those apartments, they had to form a separate entity.
Okay.
That was the recommendation, because in the past, whenever you have whenever you have an organization that their mission is not housing, because the the association's mission wasn't housing. Their association was dealing with the preservation and the maintain the legacy of Frederick Douglass. So the best way to acquire the houses was to form a separate organization, which their main goal was the dealing with the houses, dealing with the apartments. So that's what was done. The Housing Corporation was created specifically for the acquisition and the renovation and maintaining of those apartments.
Okay.
And that was their main mission. And the way it was set up, I think it was beautifully set up because the way the Housing Corporation was established or organized, we have 9 seats on the board of the Housing Corporation. 5 of them belong to members of the association. And then the other 4 were considered community members, members out that are not affiliated with the organization.
Anna Mary Douglass, 1813 to 1882. Shirley Yee writes, quote, "The enigmatic first wife of Frederick Douglass, Anna Mary Douglass, has been misunderstood and misrepresented by historians as well as by her husband's associates since he first rose to fame in 1842. Her early life, including her birth and parentage, remains sparsely documented," unquote. Anna Murray was born in Denton, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore. She was one of 12 children born to Bambara and Mary Murray. Some of the children were born enslaved, some were born free. Anna was of the latter grouping. At the age of 17, she left the home of her parents and found work in Baltimore as a housekeeper and laundress. Anna made an effort to educate herself by attending a literacy program for free blacks in Baltimore. Later, she would have her daughter Rosetta assist her. Caring for 5 children, taking care of her husband and his associates, working as a laundress and entrepreneur, she made shoes. Keeping an impeccable home and assisting as an agent on the Underground Railroad left little time for Anna to attempt formal education. Her lack of education made her vulnerable to attacks about her suitability as a spouse for Frederick Douglass, as he climbed in recognition and acclaim around the world. Anna gets but a mere mention in the books penned by Frederick Douglass. Did he forget he owed his freedom to Anna? She masterminded his escape, made the disguise that he used, and provided the funds for his passage by selling her feather bed and other belongings. She had savings that she shared with him to ensure his passage to freedom in New York. Without Anna, history might have a very different story to tell about the life of Frederick Douglass. After all, his first attempt to escape the bonds of slavery was totally ineffective. Once safely in New York, Anna joined him and they were married as Douglass, changing Frederick's last name from the one he used during his time on the docks in Baltimore. The newlyweds moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts. Anna made wonderful friends there, similar to those in Baltimore. Then the family moved to Rochester, New York, where Frederick Douglass began the North Star newspaper. The couple had 5 children born between 1839 and 1849, Rosetta, Louis, Frederick, Charles, and Annie. They rarely saw their father. He was off months and years at a time, usually giving speeches or participating in some activity relevant to the anti-slavery movement. These long absences caused the couple to emotionally detach, or so it seemed. Yet, Anna kept a brave front, maintaining her dignity and that of her marriage. In Rosetta's narrative, My Mother as I Recall Her, Anna emerges as a model of middle class. While in Europe, white women in particular disparaged the marriage of Anna and Frederick, saying directly to him their opinion that they were ill-suited because Anna was not as literate as he. He defended his marriage initially. However, the longer that he stayed away from home and in the presence of these women, the more it seemed that he became indifferent to the feelings of his wife, as he allowed at least two of these women, who will not be given in prominence in this film by naming them. In any event, they were allowed to enter and stay in Anna's home. They became ensconced for extended periods of time. They took to tutoring the children and taking public walks with Frederick Douglass, inappropriate on its face. Anna was left home preparing to serve some meal or the other. He and they treated her as a servant in her own home. Of course, the gulf between Anna and Frederick widened. Her solace were the guests visiting as friends, her children, the help that she was able to provide as an established agent on the Underground Railroad. Anna was part of the abolitionist fabric in Rochester, New York. That she provided help to frightened runaways seeking to escape slavery, no doubt caused her to reflect upon her assistance to her husband that allowed his freedom and set him on the path to the accomplishments that he alone enjoyed since his climb. She was left out of his glory days, as if she made no contribution. This had to be her eternal sadness. Anna learned of her husband's entanglements with women in Europe who lavished affection upon him. In 1882, at 69 years of age, Anna was confined to bed due to paralysis. She was in that condition for over a month. She suffered, but managed from her bed to keep her house orderly by directing duties quickly carried out. She passed on August 4, 1882, at their home in Cedar Hill. Frederick Douglass cordoned off Anna's bedroom with a rope and forbade anyone to enter, including his second wife, Helen Pitts Douglass. This gesture of consideration, in a different way when she was alive, would have been music to the heart of Anna. Rosetta Douglass Sprague, the daughter of Frederick and Anna, says that her father valued her mother. Her proof was a quoted letter that Frederick Douglass had written to his former enslaver, Thomas Auld. Instead of finding my companion a burden, he said, she is truly a helpmeet. Why the letter? And to someone who had owned him and who did not free him. No mention of wife or love or great character, just that as a companion, she was not a burden. But from the condolence letters at her passing, it is clear that Anna Murray Douglass had found favor with so many. She was spoken of as kind, generous, sincere, warm, and unaffected. Quote, unlettered though she was, there was strength of character and of purpose that won her the respect of the noblest of humankind. Anna Murray Douglass was buried in Mount Hope Cemetery, Rochester, New York. The last affront to her humanity, her life, and legacy came from the attempt of Helen Pitts Douglass, Frederick Douglass's second wife. Following his passing, Helen Pitts Douglass sought to disturb the resting place of Anna with Frederick. She attempted to enlist the strong arms of the government to remove the remains of Frederick Douglass and place them in a burial site at Cedar Hill, where she alone had planned to be buried beside Frederick Douglass. In death, as in life, the children of Anna rallied to protect their mother. Anna Murray Douglass is beginning to get noticed for her brilliance and as an important part of the legacy that is Frederick Douglass. How we might be more relevant today and more visible?
Well, you know, Helen was very forward-thinking and understanding that the legacy of Frederick Douglass would be something that could benefit future generations, and that his writings, his speeches, just what he was about would be something that would be important. So she was very smart in understanding that we need to preserve this history and to perpetuate and carry on the legacy. But I always, before I jump ahead to Helen, I always like to talk about Anna.
Please.
First, because Anna is my great-great-great-grandmother, and she and Frederick were married for 44 years, and we are as proud of her as we are of him. And, you know, so if we go back to the history of Frederick and Anna and how they met and when they met in Baltimore, she was born a free black woman. He was born into slavery, and he happened to be in Baltimore as the house servant for his master's brother, Hugh All. And they met at some point, and she really was the one that put this idea in his mind that he wasn't meant to be a slave. And as they're starting to fall in love, she would say to him, "Frederick, I don't want the father of our children to be a slave." So he planted this seed of thought in his mind, and I really think that she is an important figure in history, because had she not done that, history may have taken a whole different course. Had he not run away from slavery, had he not gone on to become the great abolitionist, published in North Star newspaper. And then she also assisted him with giving him his disguise, which was the sailor's outfit, selling a feather bed and helping to finance it. And then they would, once he would run away, they would come together in New York City and get married. And then, of course, she was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And I think a lot of times her legacy is not treated with the respect that it should be treated with, because she is told, history tells her, as somebody that was illiterate and didn't learn to read and write and maybe didn't have a desire to do that. But she was a brilliant woman. She was great with the math, so when Frederick would send money home when he was out speaking, he would always be surprised to come home and see that there was more than what he had sent. So I always like to give her respect and love, and let you know, the viewers know that this is somebody that we're as equally as proud of as we are of Frederick, and that they were married for 44 years.
Well, stop there. This year, FDMHA is honoring Anna Murray Douglass.
All right.
I feel so
Okay.
much
Well,
like
good.
you do. Yes. As a matter of fact, our program for September 17th
Right.
says, "In dedication to Anna Murray Douglass."
Helen Pitts Douglass, 1838 to 1903. Helen Pitts Douglass graduated from Mount Holyoke Female Seminary in 1859. She taught at Hampton Institute in Virginia. Hampton was a school founded after the Civil War for the education of freedmen. Due to ill health and following a conflict in which she is alleged to have accused local residents of harassing students, she moved back to the family home in Honeoye, New York. Later, she moved to Washington, D.C. In time, she met Frederick Douglass, who had just been appointed Registrar of Deeds by President James A. Garfield. He hired her as his clerk. Frederick Douglass was an acquaintance of Helen's parents, whose home had been part of the early days of the Underground Railroad. In Washington, she lived with her uncle, who lived next door to the Frederick Douglass family. In the interim, Douglass's first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, passed away in their home, Cedar Hill, named for the cedar trees on the property. This was August of 1882. It is reported that Frederick Douglass was in complete despair for a year after her passing. On January 24, 1884, Frederick Douglass and Helen Pitts were married in a small private ceremony in the home of Reverend Francis James Grimke. Grimke officiated the ceremony. Helen was fluent in French and traveled with her husband to Haiti, assisting in his work as an attaché. The couple traveled to Egypt and to Europe. This contrasts with the few local trips that he took with his first wife, Anna. Helen and Frederick were married for 11 years when Frederick Douglass passed away in their home in Washington, D.C. in 1895.
It is no secret that the children of Frederick and Anna Murray Douglass did not approve of the marriage between the two. Neither did her abolitionist-leaning parents. Indeed, Helen's father and mother stopped speaking to the couple. Helen Pitts Douglass began in earnest to keep Cedar Hill as a memorial and testament to the life of this great man, her husband. She raised the necessary funds to purchase the property for the Douglass children. And she did. It is interesting to note that the children of Frederick Douglass declined to work with their stepmother to memorialize their father. They wanted to divest themselves of the property and perhaps the memory of his marriage to Helen. They and their mother, Anna Marie Douglass, had lived at Cedar Hill. To make matters worse, Helen had the audacity to attempt to force the removal of their father from the burial site with their mother, his first wife of 44 years, from Rochester, New York, to Cedar Hill, where only the two of them would be laid to rest together. Helen went so far as to ask the United States Congress to use its considerable powers to satisfy this request. She also worked to have a bill passed that would incorporate the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association. The bill, as originally written, would have had Douglass's remains relocated from Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, New York, to Cedar Hill. Douglass's youngest son, Charles R. Douglass, protested. In an article in the New York Times on October 1st, 1898, his attitude towards his stepmother was clear. Simply, he called the effort of Helen Pitts regarding the removal of his father's remains, which would separate his parents, who were married for nearly half a century, an affront to the entire family. Congress declined to help her with her personal request to remove the remains of Frederick Douglass, but did grant her request to incorporate FDMHA in perpetuity. FDMHA was incorporated as a body politic in the District of Columbia on June 6, 1900. Helen Pitts Douglass passed away in 1903. Before she did, she spent considerable effort fundraising to pay the debts of Cedar Hill to finance the upkeep. She lectured on Frederick Douglass's life and legacy. When financial pressures became insurmountable and her health was failing, she let it be known in the public square. The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs decided to answer the call, and upon her passing, paid for the mortgage-laden property and turned the deed over to FDMHA. One of the ironies of the support from the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs is that Rosetta Douglass Sprague opposed her stepmother's ambition to save her father's property as a memorial. Now she joined the effort and became a founding member of the NACWC. Helen Pitts had also turned to her confidant and friend, Reverend Francis James Grimke, requesting that he intervene such that all of her hard work would not be wasted should she be unable to pay the mortgage before her death. Grimke agreed to use his best efforts. He exacted an agreement from Helen Pitts Douglass that if he were unsuccessful and the property had to be sold, that she'd give her blessings that upon a sale that the proceeds would be given as scholarships to students seeking higher education. She agreed. The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs was able, after Helen Douglass's death, to purchase the property and to keep the estate as a memorial, as Helen Douglass had envisioned. Because of the eventual wear and tear on the house at Cedar Hill, NACWC President Mary B. Talbert took matters in hand and in 1910 began a restoration and preservation campaign to keep up Cedar Hill. FDMHA continued this maintenance until the administrative and financial duties became too burdensome. FDMHA President Mrs. Mary E.C. Gregory took up the mantle and caused Congress to intervene, taking the responsibility of maintaining Cedar Hill under the province of the Secretary of the Interior of the United States. This branch of government turned the task over to the National Park Service, which has had this duty since 1962. Leaders of the FDMHA, NACWC, and the grandson of Frederick and Anna Douglass, Joseph Douglass, were part of the delegation to the White House to watch President John F. Kennedy execute the pertinent agreements between FDMHA and the Department of the Interior, signing over the property and signing over the duties of maintenance to the National Park Service. Since 1962, the Frederick Douglass Memorial Home has been under the administration of the National Park Service. Again, under the leadership of Mary E.C. Gregory, it became the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. As a final note to this part of the story, Mrs. Evelyn Rising, the 28th president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, now living in New Mexico, called the project manager of this film, Munyin S. Jackson Amos, at midnight Eastern Standard Time, December 2nd, 2016, imploring her to emphasize that Frederick Douglass had been speaking to the women of the NACWC on the day that he passed away. She said to, quote, "Let people know that we loved Frederick Douglass, and we are so proud to have saved Cedar Hill for posterity. We have enjoyed through the years exceptional relationships with the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association. I pray that it will continue." Unquote.
Francis James Grimke, 1850 to 1937. Francis Grimke was a Presbyterian minister and a leading advocate of civil rights. He was born to a wealthy landowner, Henry Grimke, and his slave mistress, Nancy Weston. After his father's death in 1852, he moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where he lived as a free person until 1860, when his white half-brother, Montague, brought him into his household as a servant. After a severe beating, he ran away and for 2 years became a valet in the Confederate Army. He was discovered and returned to Montague, who, after sending him to the workhouse as punishment, sold him to a Confederate officer. After the fall of Charleston, Grimke attended Morris Street School, a school for free blacks in the city. At age 16, he moved north to live with his aunts, Angelina and Sarah Grimke. With their assistance, he attended Lincoln College in Pennsylvania. He graduated in 1870 as class valedictorian, whereupon he taught mathematics, served as the school's financial agent, and studied law. Francis entered Howard Law School in 1874, but the following year enrolled in the Princeton Theological Seminary. Upon graduation in 1878, he became a Presbyterian minister at the 15th Street Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C., a major African-American congregation. He led that congregation until 1885. He was active throughout the community in Washington. Grimke was a brilliant, fiery orator who became the first African-American leader to challenge Booker T. Washington's policy of accommodation. He argued instead that African-Americans needed to fight for the justice they deserved. He denounced the racist policies of the Federation of White Churches and singled out the YMCA for its segregationist policies. Grimke also challenged the racial hierarchy and discriminatory practices of the Presbyterian Church. An early supporter of the Niagara Movement, Grimke helped found the American Negro Academy and served as trustee to Howard University. It was Grimke who officiated the marriage of Frederick Douglass and Helen Pitts in a small private ceremony in his home in Washington, D.C. on January 24, 1884. Edward A. Clark is mentioned as one of the original delegation requesting that the United States Congress pass legislation formalizing the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association into a self-perpetuating entity with Congress's perpetual support. In our current research, we have found only his name and nothing more definitive. Mae Sewell, 1844-1920, feminist, educator, and lecturer, was born in Milwaukee, the daughter of Philander W. Wright, a teacher, and Mary W. Wright. In 1866, she earned a bachelor's degree and in 1868 a master's degree from Northwestern Female College. She did some teaching in various places in the Midwest, and in 1872 she married Edwin W. Thompson and moved with him to Indianapolis. He died in 1875. She became interested in women's suffrage and attended a national convention in 1878. In 1880, she married Theodore Lovett Sewell, then head of a boys' classical school in Indianapolis. With him, she founded and then headed the girls' classical school for years, one of the three leading schools in Indianapolis. Mrs. Sewell was a charter member of the Art Association of Indianapolis, the Propylium, and the Contemporary Club. Through her life, she assisted in campaigns for female suffrage in various Midwestern states. Beginning in the 1890s, she carried her feminist interests further abroad, being elected president of the National Congress of Women in 1891 and the International Congress of Women in 1899. She began to combine this activity with working for peace. In 1909, she became chairman of the ICW Standing Committee on Peace and Arbitration, and in 1915, she chaired an organized conference of women workers to promote peace. In 1915, she sailed on the Oscar II as a member of Henry Ford's peace expedition. In 1907, she sold the girls' classical school to Anna Weaver, but was disappointed at the amount she received from the sale. Henceforward, she depended on income mainly on lecturing on women's rights, on peace and arbitration, and on psychic research. This last subject had been one of her interests since the 1880s, and she moved to a center on the subject at Eliot, Maine. In 1920, she wrote a book on her psychic experiences titled Neither Dead Nor Sleeping. She also wrote books on the higher education of women, on the women's suffrage movement in Indiana, and on women, world war, and permanent peace. Mae was known for fighting causes, whether educator, women's rights, world peace. In addition to her work on women's rights, Mrs. Sewell was an educator, lecturer, organizer, and spiritualist. William Henry Harrison Hart, October 30, 1857 to January 6, 1934, was an African-American attorney and professor of criminal law at Howard University from 1887 to 1922. He won an important legal case, Hart versus State, 100 Maryland 595, in 1905. He was born in Eufaula, Alabama on October 31, 1857. His father was Henry Clay Hart, a white slave trader born in Providence, Rhode Island in 1829. He was a descendant of Thomas Hart, an English jurist who embarked at Baddow, Essex County, England, in the Desire in 1635, landing at Ipswich, Massachusetts in 1639. He attended the American Missionary Association School in Eufaula from 1867 to 1874. In 1874, when conservative whites attempted to oust the Reconstruction-era state government, Hart campaigned in favor of Reconstruction. His life was threatened, and he fled Eufaula. He walked all the way to Washington, D.C. Upon arriving in Washington, D.C., Hart enrolled in the college preparatory program at Howard University in 1876 and graduated with a preparatory department certificate in 1880. He enrolled in the undergraduate program and received a Bachelor of Arts BA degree in 1885. He entered the Howard University School of Law and received his Bachelor of Laws, LLB, in 1887. From Howard University, he also received a Master of Arts, MA degree in 1889 and a Master of Laws, LLM degree in 1891. While a law student, he worked for Senator William M. Evarts as a private secretary. In 1890, Hart was selected as the Dean of the Howard's Criminal Law Department and the Dean of the Agricultural Department in 1897. In 1890, Hart joined the faculty of Howard University's law school with a starting salary of $1,500. He taught there for the next 25 years. He became a recognized authority on corporate law, criminal law, and torts. Along with fellow law school professor William Henry Richards, Hart secured $10,000 from Congress to build the law school's first building. Hart augmented his income by working for the United States Treasury, United States Department of Agriculture, and as the Assistant Librarian of Congress at the Library of Congress from 1893 to 1897. Hart was the first black lawyer appointed as Special U.S. District Attorney for the District of Columbia in 1889. In 1904, in a groundbreaking case, Hart challenged Maryland's Jim Crow laws. He was traveling in a whites-only section of the railroad car when a conductor ordered him to move to the blacks-only car as the train crossed the Maryland state line. Hart refused and was arrested, charged, convicted of violating the separate car law, and fined $5. He appealed to the Maryland Court of Appeals, which held that Maryland's Jim Crow laws were an improper restriction on interstate commerce, so long as Hart was crossing state lines rather than engaged in intrastate travel. The racial segregation laws could not apply. In 1897, Hart started the Hart Farm School and Junior Republic for dependent colored boys on 700 acres of land along the Potomac River near Fort Washington, Maryland, that he purchased from Senator Evarts. The school was capable of housing up to 200 students. On July 11, 1905, Hart, along with 28 other black intellectuals, including W.E.B. Du Bois, founded the Niagara Movement with the drafting of the Niagara Movement's Declaration of Principles. It formally incorporated in 1906 and was the precursor organization to the NAACP in 1910.
Well, tell me, if you can, some of the other community organizations that the FDMHA connects with.
We had, and I have to say had because I don't think the Flower Club of Anacostia is in active existence now.
Mm-hmm.
But at one time that was one of our most supportive linkages within that community. The Flower Club of Anacostia helped to circulate all of our information. They came to meetings that we had. We attended meetings that they were invited to, and they helped to promote the name of Frederick Douglass. We also received in 1990 an award for historic preservation that helped again to forge a linkage. And that linkage was forged not only with the Historical Preservation Society, but with the Sumner School, where the award was given at that time. They then got to know a little about Frederick Douglass and what was happening. We forged a relationship with the bank. The bank gave to us funds that we could then award small scholarships to our young people. Some of them got a bond, some of them got a bond and a book, or whatever the funds allowed for us to distribute. Ketchum Elementary School, we had a wonderful, and still have, a wonderful relationship with them. We supported their activities, made sure that their students were involved in the activities of Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association.
Okay. What about the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs?
It's an integral part of us. The history is such that the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs was the one that maintained the grounds and maintained the home to the extent that it was able to be maintained and then turned over to the Park Service. So theirs is a history of historic preservation, if you really want to talk about it, because they were the ones in the lean years when our association was not as active and was not functioning as well. They were the ones that maintained the grounds. Mrs. Parham, who lived on the grounds, got the Boy Scouts in the community and in the neighborhood. They cut the grass. They maintained, along with her flowers. They were her flowers. You don't bother her flowers. But they were there, and under the auspices of the National Association of Colored Women's Club, they maintained the grounds there for years. We continued to have a relationship with them. In fact, at their annual meeting, we have been invited to be participants on their program, and they are sitting members. The president of the National Association of Colored Women's Club sits on the board of the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Trustees.
I have enjoyed my life, and I joined the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Society around 1997 or 8, and enjoyed my term there.
But tell me this before you continue on. Who brought you onto the board? Because you have to be nominated and then decide for yourself if you're interested, and then you're voted on.
Well, my mother had always been an avid, always but very fond of Frederick Douglass, and she had a club when she was in 5th grade in grade school, and she had always admired him. And when she passed, well, I became a member of the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Society.
What did
Dr.
Pitts have to do
Yeah.
with anything?
But Dr. Pitts was the one who influenced me after my mother passed. She insisted that I become a member of the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Society, which I did, and I enjoyed it very much. But other things, I had to resign in a couple of years later due to other activities that I had.
Well, now, were you there and witnessed the tree planting?
Yes,
on the grounds? Can you tell us anything about that?
Yes, I witnessed the tree planting. They planted a tree in honor of my mother on her 100th birthday. And it is still there, I think. And years before Frederick Douglass' home was taken over by the Federation of Women's Clubs, I have some friends that used to use it as a hangout. before Miss Parham became housekeeper and saved it.
Well, I wonder what Frederick Douglass would say if they were up there dancing, carrying on his grounds.
Oh, they did. I was surprised when they told me that.
But
it was a hangout for the teenagers. That was back in the early 1900s, 1920, I guess maybe the 1930s, around the 1930s and 40s.
Well, then we can know a little bit that the hangout was not raucous.
Everybody
was always with Christine, so.
Yeah, they just went there for a hangout because at that time they probably weren't able to go into the public places. They were too young for the public places. So anyway, Miss Parham took over and she became the caretaker. And the National Federation of Women's Clubs had parties there, not parties, either meetings there for years before the Park Service took it over.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just learned that FDMHA had their meetings on the lawn, where Miss Parham's house is currently, but they had their annual meeting outside there. I hadn't known that before this process.
Many a cookie, many a sandwich.
Did you? Okay. Well, tell me something about your mom, please.
Well, she was one of 5 children. She was born in Charlottesville, Virginia, and she moved to D.C. when she was about 7 or 8, I guess. Maybe older anyway. And she went to summer school and then to minor teachers college and got her degree. And she taught in the elementary school until she married. And at that time, teachers couldn't be married and continue to work. So she had to resign from working, and she raised 8 children. And after that, she became a lifetime member of the Women's Club.
The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs.
And she was president at one time and the secretary.
Of FDMHA. Of the Federated Women.
Yeah, and then later on, I think the Federation, the Frederick Douglass Memorial Historical Society was a result of.
Say it again, that they did what now? You're talking about the payment of paying off the mortgage?
Paying off the mortgage. They saved. They did save it from going into bankruptcy.
Yes, they did. They absolutely did. Well, I'm fiddling with this paper because I think, is your mom on here?
Yes, she is. Right.
Oh, okay. Well, this is great. This is when the Frederick Douglass apartments were dedicated, right? Well, I'm going to turn this, well, I don't know. Our erstwhile videographer and photographer can tell me how to best do this. Now, turn it around. Okay. I thank you so much. Everything that has happened with this project has been so interesting, and some of the tasks, I know are daunting, and so many memories have faded, but the whole purpose is to try to collect right now the memories that are available, because so many people have passed who had a hand in continuing the legacy of this organization, FDMHA, which was started in the 1900s. And so much has been lost. Unfortunately, some papers were consumed in a fire. And so for you to have this is very exciting to me. By the way, the dedication of the Frederick Douglass Garden Apartments is what we were shown here. And here is Patricia Roberts Harris. Yeah, your mother did, because she was at, was she at the White House too?
Yeah, she was invited to the White House by the Johnsons, I think, when they turned over the deed to the
National Park Service. John F. Kennedy was, I know that I saw a wonderful photograph with all of the ladies. I think that's great. I hope I can.
I think she went to the White House a couple of times with that program. May have been with this. Was it the stamp, maybe trying to get a stamp, or was that later? I don't know.
Well, now, that part I don't know.
I'm not sure about it either.
Did your mother travel up to Rochester to work with the Friends of Frederick Douglass?
We went up there on Frederick Douglass Day in June 11th. I think they celebrated.
And they still do.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I went up there a couple of times too.
Oh,
and
here.
just
Okay, look. The 100th birthday of Mrs. Eudora Gilmore, a cedar for Cedar Hill.
Yeah.
That's when 2 dogwood trees were planted and memorialized. They memorialized Mrs. Mabel Diggs and Wilhelmina Crossan. Oh yeah, I've heard those names. They were emerita trustees of the FDMHA and members of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. Okay, so this is your handiwork. Let me put you on that. And do you think that FDMHA is relevant today? When it started out, the whole idea was to preserve the artifacts and the legacy of Frederick Douglass. And the troubling thing for me, before I let you answer that, is that there's not enough mention of Anna Murray Douglass. And so in the context of what I'm hoping to do, I want to lift her name as well as Helen Pitts Douglass, who really started FDMHA, because theirs is part of the legacy that Frederick Douglass is known for. You know, Anna Murray Douglass helped him escape and reared his children, and she was also a conductor on the Underground Railroad. But all of that figures into what the legacy is. But when I read the mission statement, it's to preserve the artifacts and the legacy. But now that the National Park Service has,
I don't know where we place in that.
well, that's part, yeah.
I don't know where our place is, but I think we should be continue to work with them to be sure that it is taken care of.
Okay, well, that's very good. Well, let me see here now. I want to read something that I just think is just absolutely wonderfully written that talks about your mother. First, this is at her homegoing service, I believe. She was a trustee of FDMHA for over 25 years, and she sponsored local school or a team for the educational program. And we still have the educational program going on with it. Well, we have annual essay contests, and students who are seniors in high school have to read certain texts about the life of Frederick Douglass and then write an essay based on a question that we pose. And then we have adjudicators, who who read and evaluate, and then they have
They used to give
scholarships. Yeah. Well, we've gone up from there. We've given a little bit of
cash.
The
cash is what you need.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, but they still have to apply to school.
Uh-huh.
So we give $1,000 scholarship, one $2,000 scholarship, and one $3,000. As a matter of fact, before I came here today, I was on the phone trying to encourage one of our donors to give us more money for the coming year. We'll see what happens. But I want to read this. I searched for my soul, but my soul I could not find. I reached for my God, but my God could not reach me. Then I helped my brother, and I found all three: my soul, my God, and me. And they said that was how your mother was. She helped,
She was.
I think that's pretty profound. I don't know who the author of that is, but I like it. And the last part says that Mrs. Gilmore died as she lived, a woman of courage and great fortitude, a woman of great dignity and style. The Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association trustees will cherish, along with family and friends, her love and memory. Truly, this woman was in touch with her soul, her God, and herself. And the president of the board at that time was Vivian L. Smith, and the secretary was Vera L. Hunter. So I think that's a really sort of a good synopsis. Because
if she was here, she would like that.
She would like it. Oh, good. Then I'm more than happy. And now, is there anything else you would like to add to what you shared today?
But I'm so glad that they are taking so good care of Frederick Douglass' home now.
Exactly.
And I hope it will continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thank you so much, and you're just such a lovely spirit, and I appreciate it, even though I had to drag you here. Thank you so much.
I'm glad that I came.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much for asking, and I hope that the program will be okay.
Okay, it will be. Thank you.
In terms of my background, I was in communications and public relations work for nearly 40 years. I also had a brief period as a teacher before that, but I worked for government agencies, state, local, and federal government and nonprofit organizations. And I started off in PR in New York City back in the late 60s when I finished graduate school. And I was there and moving up and around in PR jobs, and my last job there was with the Public Affairs Department of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And it was while I was there that I got a job offer. They brought me to Washington in 1982. And that was to head up the communications office for the U.S. Postal Service. And from there, I was there 4 years, and of course, one serves at the pleasure in that level of a job. So the Postmaster General who hired me retired, and then when new people came in, they wanted to bring their people in. And I made the decision that I wanted to stay in Washington rather than return to New York. I had gotten what we know now as Potomac fever. And so I wanted to stay here, and I ended up being communications director for the city of Washington for 2.5 years in Mayor Barry's third term. And from there, I went back to nonprofit world, which is where I started my career in communications in New York. And so I started my career in New York, but I stayed here, but I went back to nonprofit world, and I headed the communications office for a national association called the Child Welfare League of America. And from there, I ended up doing a stint with the the Girl Scouts Council of the nation's capital. And I retired in 2008. So that's kind of a brief summary of my years in public relations and communications work. But it was because of my interest in that field that I proposed a brochure for the association, and I did that, and I'm pleased that I was able to find one copy, which I'm going to hand to you.
Fantastic.
As far as I know, it's the only copy left, but it's a 6-panel, as you'll see, a 6-panel brochure that talks about the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, who we are, the early years and more recent years. And we distributed those widely at the time. We worked closely with, of course, with the Park Service staff, and we had a really good relationship with Bob Stan, this was before he was head of the Park Service, when he was head of the National Capital East, I believe it was called, that region, and he often met with us, and we knew the staff at the house and so forth, and often took guests over there to Frederick Douglass' home. And I remember very fondly the relationships that developed during those years and the activities that we were engaged in.
Okay, today is September 17th, 2016. It's my mom's birthday. If she were alive, we'd be singing Hallelujah and all of that.
It's my son's birthday, too.
Is it right? But I want you to introduce yourself to the listening audience and your relationship to FDLJ.
Okay. So my name is Shakira Abdul-Ali, and I'm an organization development consultant and a marketer. I live and work from Trenton, New Jersey. Probably have about 15 or 20 years in work in the public sector, and then most of the rest of the time I work for myself. And 3 years ago, I was privileged to become a part of the Board of Trustees of the Frederick Douglass Memorial Historical Association at your invitation.
Well, tell me this, why do you care about Frederick Douglass and working in the vineyard to keep his legacy alive?
Okay, so I guess the medium-sized version of this story is that I am a public citizen, I guess. I don't know, a professional citizen, I guess that's what I would call myself. Meaning that I really take the role of citizenship as a responsibility, maybe because my father, after serving, both my father and my stepfather served in the military, and then my stepfather, after leaving the military, became an elected official in a small town. And so I think I take civic responsibility very, very critically. I think it's important. And Frederick Douglass was such a person. He was a private citizen. He freed himself. I mean, think about that concept. Generating your own liberation from a legal status of servitude. I mean, that's it really takes something to do that. And I think that in these times when our liberties are at question, and I say they're at question because our suffrage is at question. Our right to vote is at question in these times. And I think that he has so much to share with us as a lesson and a model of an individual, a citizen who takes the responsibility of their own citizenship and their own freedom very seriously, and acts on that responsibility in a way that serves the greater good. And so I think that for that reason, it's really important that we revive his memory in the consciousness of our community and the greater society. Revive the consciousness of his legacy, and learn enough to live it out in a way that would make him proud.
I'm Mooneen Jackson, and with me today is Dr. LaVon Leslie, who will be sharing some of her insights on the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs and its relationship with the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association. Today is June 18th, 2016, and we are at the Anacostia Library on Good Hope Road in Washington, D.C. This is the third interview of several to go dealing with the life and legacy of Frederick Douglass as relates directly to the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, and whether or not the organization has lived up to its mission. Is it relevant today? What can be done so that the future is vibrant with the legacy of Frederick Douglass? Dr. Leslie, thanks for joining me, and I am really delighted that you have come to share. I know that you know quite a bit about not only Frederick Douglass, but the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. So I'm just going to let you, first of all, tell us a little bit about you so that we can know who's talking.
Thank you for this invitation. It's my pleasure. I am the editor of the History of the National Association of Colored Women. I am a retired professor emeritus, Howard University. I have my doctorate in U.S. history with specialization in 19th and 20th century U.S. history. Therefore, it was my ambition to edit the History of the National Association of Colored Women, and in doing so, I was able to also do more research on Frederick Douglass. So it's my pleasure to be here to provide information on the association and the connection that the association has with Frederick Douglass.
Well, before you get to that, now tell us a little bit about where you were born, where you came from, why you got to D.C., how you got to D.C.
Oh, okay,
and all that
sure.
stuff.
Well, I am a native Texan. I actually came to D.C. to pursue my doctorate in history at Howard University. I actually started out with an undergraduate degree in political science pre-law from the University of Texas, and also a master's from University of Nebraska in Omaha in public administration, a Master of Arts from Clark Atlanta in history. And in later years, as I mentioned, I ended up coming to Howard University in the late 80s to pursue my doctorate in U.S. history. I have written many articles pertaining to African American history, Black women, as well as articles in reference to world leaders. In addition to that, I have publications to my credit. Other than the National Association of Colored Women, I have written a book actually on my family history, Freedom and Slavery in Texas, which was published maybe about 4 years ago. I've written a couple of articles on Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, as well as one of my favorite authors would be James Baldwin, writers, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes. In terms of my family, I have a son who is a mathematician. He's a professor at college in Texas, and my daughter is a project manager in Atlanta, Georgia. And they visit me quite often. They have also traveled with me to Africa. I was a Fulbright Fellow in Africa, particularly in Dakar, Senegal, and Banjul, Gambia. They were with me. And I also have spent time in Ecuador as a member of the Association for Third World Studies. And my daughter has been with me to many of these places that I've visited over the years as a result of my research and my participation in the Association for Third World Studies.
Well, this is very exciting. So I feel that you are coming to us with such a breadth and depth of information that's going to be very exciting for the listeners to understand and believe, what you come to the table with, as it were. So tell me, how did you become part of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs? When, how, why?
I actually became part of the National Association of Colored Women's Club approximately, I would say, 16 years ago, when I met a member at my church in D.C., Shiloh Baptist Church, which is one of the oldest Baptist churches in the District of Columbia. And we happen to be in the same group. When you become a member of Shiloh, you are assigned to a particular group, and you have your own functions to help promote the church. And this member invited me to one of the meetings, and I realized that it was the National Association of Colored Women's Club, which I already had some knowledge of it as a result of being a historian. Mm-hmm. And I decided to do further research in terms of how the organization was structured, and realized that in order to become a member, you had to become a member first of a local club. As a result, I became a member of the Tuesday Club of Social Workers, Inc., which was founded in 1909, and I have been active with the organization since that time. And as a result of becoming a member of the Tuesday Evening Club, the local club, I became a member of Washington Vicinity Federation of Women's Clubs on the state level, which is also affiliated with the National Association of Colored Women. In addition, I became a member of Northeast Federation of Women's Club, which is the regional level affiliated with the National Association of Colored Women. And as a result, over the years, I have been active with the organization. And I would say maybe 5 years ago, I was approached by the current president to revise the history of the National Association of Colored Women. And I was very happy to do so.
Was that Evelyn Rising?
Evelyn Rising.
Okay.
President
Now,
Evelyn Rising.
tell me this, what is the purpose of the organization? What does it do? Why was it formed?
The organization was actually formed in 1896, formed in 1895, incorporated in 1896. I want to say that. As a result of Black Women's Clubs merging together to form a national organization to promote community projects, to uplift the community. And this is why the organization's motto is uplifting as we climb. So the purpose of it was to promote economic and social programs to benefit the community, and also to promote education by having programs to benefit our youth, and other programs to help women have more important roles in the community.
Can you identify some of the founding members, and I know that my favorite, Harriet Tubman, was at the first convention. Is that correct?
Harriet Tubman was present at the first meeting.
Okay.
And also she attended the convention as well. You are correct. However, she's not considered a founding member because she didn't really play a role in helping to form the organization at the time. But she was there to give her support. And that's why she's noted in the history book as being at the founding and also at the convention when it was established. In terms of some of the prominent members, Murray Church Terrell served as the first president. Other prominent members we had who were officers happened to be Ida B. Wells, Mrs. Booker T. Washington, Margaret Mary Washington, Mary McLeod Bethune, Nanny Helen Barrows, Salome Yates, just to mention a few.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Now, have there been, in your estimation, special projects that were noteworthy then in the 1800s when it was founded and have carried on today? And if so, name them, and if not, what are some of the highlights of the activities that are ongoing?
Well, I would say some of the first programs that the organization initiated happened to be rescuing the Frederick Douglass home.
Okay.
And this was as early as 1916.
Yes. Well, what do you mean by rescuing?
When I said rescuing the Frederick Douglass home, Frederick Douglass' wife approached the organization to help save the organization because there was a $15,000 debt that was owed on the property, and the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association had been established in 1900, and when it was established in 1900, Helen Pitts Douglass gave the deed to the Memorial FDMHA, and there was a $15,000 debt that was still owed on the property. The Frederick Douglass Historical Memorial Association approached the National Association of Colored Women to assist in procuring funds to help preserve the estate. And as a result, the National Association of Colored Women decided to help the organization by recruiting members to do fundraising to save it. So as a result, they were able to pay off the debt for the property, and which was a $5,000 balance, and assume the deed actually for the property. And in later years, they also did, they were able to renovate the cottage at Frederick Douglass home. So this was a major project that continued on for years until actually 1962, when it was decided to try to have it designated as a historic site, and it was when President, actually 1963, when President Lyndon B. Johnson, was it 62?
Kennedy.
Kennedy. Well, it was Kennedy, but it was Johnson who actually ended up being the one to sign it, I think, because in the book we have Johnson, we don't have Kennedy. But you're right, Kennedy was the one who was approached, but he wasn't able to, just like he wasn't able to carry out the civil rights.
Okay.
But I thought it was commemorable for Johnson to be able to make sure that it was followed through. But you're exactly right.
But let's go back for a minute. I want to make sure this is clear. When Helen Pitts Douglass approached the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, or she approached Congress, and then, I know that, but did she approach the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, or did Congress do that, or did the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs approach Congress? How did that go?
No, she had already approached Congress, and this was, in approaching Congress, she went to Congress to be able to establish FDMHA.
That's right.
And that was 1900. We're talking about years later, before she passed,
Okay.
that she realized that she needed funds to help sustain it, because it was still in her under her ownership
Okay.
until she passed. So she realized that there was a debt owed, and she actually approached the National Association of Colored Women because she had a relationship with Mary McLeod Bethune
Oh, okay.
at the time.
Okay, good.
So Mary McLeod Bethune was actually the first president to initiate a project to help the Frederick Douglass estate.
Okay.
And in later years we have Dr. Rosa Gregg, who did fundraising to help sustain it. And as a result of the National Associations of Colored Women's relationship with Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, members were basically appointed to, a certain amount of members were appointed to the board at that time.
Which board you talking
To
about?
Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, as a result of the National Association of Colored Women's relationship with Frederick Douglass estate.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they continue to have a permanent seat. Yeah, you were right. And you know, this is just a curiosity. I understood that Madam C.J. Walker actually paid the last part of the mortgage on the home. I don't know if you know that, but it just came to my mind that she actually did that because it was a mortgage burning. So how did she, was she a part of the National?
She was part of the committee. This is what they did.
Okay, okay.
The National Association of Colored Women, I have it right here, formed a committee to raise the funds. And it actually ended up being more than 5,000, it was 15,000. They raised more than what was needed. And Madam C.J. Walker was one of the contributors. Not only Madam C.J. Walker, but Maggie Lena Walker.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, I know.
Happened to be among some of the ladies, and I have the names with me.
Well, I don't know about Megan.
So it's a committee.
This is an aside. I Booker T. Washington played them in basketball because I'm from Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Because they were their team.
Okay.
Anyway, back to the subject at hand. What, if anything, have you personally experienced as relates to FDMHA? Have you been a part of any activities yourself? And tell us about that experience.
Okay. I have actually been somewhat active in terms of supporting FDMHA over the years. I have attended its Frederick Douglass Scholarship Essay events, Violence for Douglass event, as well as some of the other oratorial programs that has been conducted over the years. And also some of the lectures that's been sponsored by FDMHA. I have also participated in those.
And you were the guest speaker when we did an important Get Out the Vote or Voter Education project. And you brought some of your students from Howard. I know that because I actually come, so I'm trying to, I think it's an important, it was an important segue into the community that FDMHA did. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I definitely agree. And that, I really enjoyed that presentation because it focused on Frederick Douglass and the importance of voting, and well, 4th of July as well, and it gave a good historical overview. And I was able to have the students comprehend a better understanding of the relevance of Frederick Douglass over the years. And although he wasn't a politician, he was a civil rights leader, he was very active in terms of encouraging blacks to be politically astute. And I thought that was important for students to understand that in today's times. And this was also at a time when, you know, we had President Obama assuming office.
Well, tell me now, when you look back from the historical lens and you look at your participation today, do these two organizations remain relevant in your personal opinion and in your experience? Not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot.
Well, In terms of the two organizations being relevant today, I believe that they are, and the reason why I believe that they are is because we still have a lot to accomplish in terms of community involvement, equality, politics, and both organizations have a history of being involved with those types of activities. I believe that the National Association of Colored Women should be more active with FDMHA, more so than it has been over the years. And when I say that, having joint programs to be more visible in the community, especially encouraging more people in the community to vote, promoting social programs to help women with social issues, programs to help our youth become more educated, particularly in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math. These are some projects that we can carry on, but in order to do this, the organizations need to come together and maybe have a mentoring program to carry out these initiatives. In terms of, I give FDMHA credit for some of the programs that it has carried over the years due to the fact that it allows students to have the opportunity to secure scholarships, to learn, to promote, to educate themselves. Scholarships to further their education in terms of college, but scholarships for their skills in terms of knowing more about Frederick Douglass when they participate in the oratorical essays. They are required to do essays on Frederick Douglass' legacy, and in doing so, they're able to learn more about its importance.
Hi there, I'm Cassandra, and I'm a winner from 2 years ago of the Frederick Douglass Award. Currently, I am a second-year student at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, where I'm a theater arts major studying directing, lighting, and makeup design. And I am so thankful for the scholarship I've received because it helped me in so many ways. Art school is not cheap, and it has made such a big difference in my life to have this support. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Marquita Owens. I am a recent graduate of South Carolina State University, and I was also a 2011 recipient of the Frederick Douglass Scholarship. I'm currently making my way towards law school, but I would like to thank the Frederick Douglass Association because through their money it helped me with my books, and therefore I was able to study and get all the good grades that I needed in order to graduate. So I definitely encourage every student in the area to apply. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm currently a scholarship recipient for the Frederick Douglass Historical Essay Contest. I just wanted to thank everyone. It has been an honor to receive the scholarship. It's benefited a lot for me. I'll be taking my future currently to go to Penn State University in the fall, and I'll be majoring in criminal justice. I would love to thank my parents for motivating me to do this scholarship. I feel like this will benefit me a lot throughout the future, and this scholarship actually helped me relive Frederick Douglass as well as an abolitionist. The ceremony was amazing as well. I enjoyed the guest speaker for her kind words, which will lift me up in spirits as I continue throughout my journey in Penn State University. Thank you.
My name is Ryan Wise, and I did this Frederick Douglass scholarship. I got second place in 2000. And I know this scholarship will really help me because it'll take me to doing bigger things. It'll help me improve myself in my speech and help me improve myself in the way I communicate because I need to communicate better. And I would encourage everybody else to do the scholarship too so they can get help that they need to and everyone is passionate about that.
It was very informative to me. It basically gave me a little highlight on what I need to do once I go off to college and what I must handle and be prepared for it once I go to college and also leave, because as one of the speakers have said, this is a global thing and we're competing against anyone and everyone. And so as us being recipients of the Frederick Douglass Scholarship, we must be prepared and show up at all times.
So I'm really grateful to this program and what it has done for me so far. I've really advanced in my studies, in the violin because I wish to pursue it as a career in the future. And right now, I recently got into the Prince George's County High School Honors Orchestra as concertmaster, so that's a big accomplishment for me. I've also joined the DC Youth Orchestra and we'll be going to Chile, so it's really exciting. I'd just like to once again thank the trustees and Ms. Jackson and everyone here, because this is such an amazing opportunity for people who would like to continue their studies in music. It's amazing. So thank you so much. Thank
you. Dr. McLaren, I want you to tell us a little bit about the instrument you're holding in your hand, and particularly the authenticity, if you can tell us that. And one last thing, how much would it be, do you think, to make sure that it's in good repair, and the piano in good repair? And I'll tell you why I'm asking in a minute.
Well, the violin, according to our records, date back as early as when the National Park Service took over the actual, all the possessions and property. And essentially what we have here is a violin that was owned by Joseph Douglass at one time, and his spouse actually donated to the site as a gift and deeded it over to us. And we've been custodial officers of the actual violin since then. And it's definitely a family heirloom that's been in the family for many years. And I'll let Kenneth take over the stories of the personal connections that you have with it.
Well, the personal connection is Fanny was Joseph's wife and my great-grandmother. And I had the opportunity as a boy in Frederick Douglass's summer home, which, by the way, he never lived in. It was not completed before he passed away. But I would sit on my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglass's lap, and she would tell me firsthand stories about Frederick Douglass. And we would look across the Chesapeake Bay, and on the other side you can see land, which is the eastern shore of Maryland, where he was born into slavery. And whenever I'm talking to young people and they hear that I'm the great-great-great-grandson, it sounds like I'm so far removed, but really when you consider that Fanny met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl, she didn't know that she was going to grow up and marry his grandson, but that's what happened. So even with all of those greats, I'm one person away from history. And so this violin was a big part of our family as far as the legacy of music and the stories that were told about Frederick being a self-taught violinist, which a lot of people don't know. And then he was also a great teacher because he taught Joseph how to play, and then Joseph would continue his education, his music education at the Boston Conservatory, and then go on to be the first black classical recording artist for what was then called the Victor Talking Machine Company. And as great as he was, though, he was relegated to playing in segregated halls because of the times. But as I said earlier, I probably owe my existence to that violin, because had Joseph not played it, or I should go back even further, had Frederick not played it, and then taught Joseph how to play it, and if he didn't go to Oberlin to do a concert and had Fanny play with him, they might not have ever met, and I wouldn't be standing here today.
Well, the FDMHA, if I could just jump in, is one of the what I consider the signature programs of FDMHA is the Violins for Douglass program. And because that aspect of Frederick Douglass's life, it was not as well talked about as his oratory or his writing skills and that kind of thing, I just thought it's so important to try to bring out other aspects of his life and to use that as encouragement for young people in particular. But the last time we had our program, 2 older people said they wanted to get in on the deal. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so what we do, and this will be our 3rd year, is have a workshop with various violinists who will teach our young people. And we have a musical petting zoo, which has violins and other string instruments. And there's someone who will teach them. This year's Kevin Gillis out in Prince George's County. But anyway,
will allow them to touch the instrument, and at the end of that session, the touching session, let's say, for the beginners, they can at least play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, something like that, with two of them together. But the other more advanced students, or the early beginners, have this workshop, and last year they were able to play in concert with these professionals. And so one of the ideas that we have tried to share with the National Park Service and with the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation, because we need money, is the refurbishing of these two instruments, and to find a way to allow professional musicians to play here maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, and have little children play with them. Now, that was the brainchild of the Otley Music School. Neville Otley and Edgar Ajaho have been working with us, and they stellar musicians. I mean, they just have all kinds of, they have a music school, and they have coached many young people. But anyway, that was the idea, and I'm saying it publicly so that, you know, if I can encourage somebody out there who hears us to help us to finance that, if that's something that we could do as one of our projects.
1, 2, ready, go. Rest, rest, rest. Again. Rest, 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 rest. Short, 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 long, long. Short, 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 long, long. 1, 2, do it again.
Move your finger back. It's too far up. That was good. Got it.